This is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom, and welcome to the Jewish Spotlight. Tonight we're going to talk about something that is, I think, very close to something you'd like to know more about in your life. Because you know, you have a body and you have a soul. Yes? We believe that the soul is really the part of you that makes you tick and makes you who you are, unique and different from any other human being in the world. And as a result, finding out a little bit about that soul is something we try to do a little bit of here at the Jewish Spotlight. And in Torah also, Judaism also has a body and a soul. The body is, let's say, the physical mitzvahs, the things that we do, the traditions we have, the rituals we fulfill. But there's also the soul of the Torah. And the soul of the Torah represents the reason why we do the mitzvahs. It's the spiritual level of the Torah itself, which connects us to our Creator, which connects us to our soul, which connects us to God. And that is the part of Judaism that's so important, because when we just connect to the physical part of Judaism, we just do things out of rote, we just do things because we have to, we do things because it's a physical activity, what spirituality is in there? What meaning do we reach? What purpose and sense of fulfillment do we get as a result of that? Sometimes it's not great. But when you go deeper into the meaning of Judaism, deeper into the meaning of every single mitzvah, then there's something that ticks inside. There's a vibration, there's a feeling, there's a certain emotion that is brought out that tells us, hey, listen, this is going a little bit deeper than the surface and reaching to something inside that really makes a difference and makes my life more meaningful. So today we're going to talk with somebody who's felt that experience and who's going to help share with us a little bit about his experience in the way that maybe you'll be able to enhance your life also, make it more Jewish, more meaningful, more purposeful, and more spiritual. So I want to welcome Howard Moscow to our show. Thank you for joining us, Howard.
Thank you for having me, too.
It's a pleasure to see you.
Yes, good seeing you again.
And we're going to talk a little bit about Jewish spirituality, which I know, if I may call you Chaim, because I know that's your Hebrew name, that's something, Chaim, that you've been involved in and you've been pursuing and you've had an endeavor with it for a very long time. I know in the Jewish area, till when? When did you start getting involved with the Jewish spirituality?
I think it's been about 19, 20 years now.
Okay.
And before that, I was involved in really seeking out spirituality and godliness through other paths.
All right. Now, let's step back a little bit. Did you grow up here on Long Island?
Yes, I grew up in Island Park, which is on the South Shore of Long Island.
D'Amato territory.
I know Al, not well, but I know Al. We've met a number of times.
And growing up there, you were Orthodox, conservative, Reform, unaffiliated. You knew anything about Judaism at the time?
I was bar mitzvahed. I went to a conservative shul. Went to Hebrew school because I had to.
Right. So you were a typical Jewish kid?
I was a typical suburban Jewish kid.
Okay, fine. So all of a sudden you grew older and something ticked inside and you wanted a little bit more meaning in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what happened.
Actually, I can make it a long or a short story.
Let's make it a short story.
We'll make a medium
It's a half-hour show.
Okay. I went to Ithaca College.
Okay.
Because as a Jewish kid growing up in the suburbs, you had to go to college. That was just sort of like expected what you would do. It seemed like a neat things to do to go away to school.
I think it still is that way.
Yeah, I think it probably is. But there's nothing I really wanted to do in college except I was good in sports. So I decided that I'd become a physical education major.
All right.
Which was in Ithaca had a good department in that. And as part of physical education, I took a karate class. I got very involved in the martial arts. In the martial arts, we started going below the surface into the energetic aspect of the martial arts.
Right.
Which then eventually led into meditation.
Okay.
And then I was looking for someone who was an expert in meditation, which led into an Indian guru.
Somebody you found in Ithaca.
Someone that I found out about in Ithaca.
Yes.
But that my sister was involved in.
Okay.
Who was also going to college up in Boston at that time. It also didn't hurt that we smoked a fair amount of dope at that time.
Okay.
I was already looking to get into some type of otherworldly experience.
Right. Well, this was back in the 60s and 70s.
This
when,
is
of
back in
course,
65, 66,
right.
you know,
Okay.
pretty much.
For those who are familiar with those times, it was a common endeavor.
It was a hippie type
Okay.
experience. And for me, when I started getting more serious about wanting to have more spirituality, more meaning into my life, I chose not to go into Judaism because I thought I knew what Judaism was. And it appeared to me at that point, from my upbringing, that Judaism was an empty shell. I didn't see anyone really taking spirituality seriously. So if I wanted to go into spirituality, I really had to find a path where spirituality was paramount.
Okay.
And that led me into an Indian guru
Fine.
type path.
All right. Now, without going into a lot of details as far as what you learned from the Indian guru, you were there for how many years?
I was
In that
following
path.
this one path for about 7 years.
7 years. From what I understand, you followed it and you excelled it and you became a teacher as well.
Yes, I actually took it very seriously. I would spend anywhere between 1 to 4 hours a day meditating.
1 to 4 hours meditating?
1 to 4 hours a day in meditation.
What'd your mother say about that?
I was married.
Oh,
So
what'd your wife
the
say
question
about
was,
that?
And I had kids. So it was basically now where's Daddy? He's meditating. I was basically.
This is while the kids are crying and they have their pampers changed.
Yeah, I had my own little room in the house,
Uh-huh.
up on the top floor, and basically
Okay.
I would be basically it was like I'd only get about 4 or 5 hours sleep at night. So I'd be doing meditation usually before, in the morning and also in the evening.
So you taught meditation as well.
Yes.
And you had many students and people would come to you and they would ask you to share with them.
After a while, I sort of became like a mini guru. I got off into a bit of a ego trip and a bit of a power trip, and I really thought I was something on the spiritual path.
This was in Manhattan?
I had
Or
a
here
center in
Long Island?
Manhattan,
Okay.
and most of my focus was in Manhattan, but I had some students out in Long Island also.
All right. And then all of a sudden, was it out of the blue or what happened? Why all of a sudden did you decide that you wanted to find out about your Jewish roots?
Well, there was an in-between stage. I mean, my wife kept telling me I was involved in a cult. Of course, I said, no, this isn't a cult, this is the true path. And there was a transition period in moving away from this specific spiritual path and sort of becoming just like into like a new age spiritual sampler.
Okay.
And I thought at that point I was free. I'd freed myself from my Indian guru, and I was now basically taking what I knew and basically offering it to the world as sort of, like I said, a mini guru. And then what happened, at that point I had an office in Manhattan, a nice office on Park Avenue, doing physical therapy and healing. And into my office walked a Lubavitch Chassid woman. And we started talking. And she started giving me books, and there was an aspect of Judaism that I didn't know existed. I started saying, this is really far out. There's a depth of spirituality here that I knew nothing about.
It was more than chopped liver sculptures and gefilte fish and this kind of
It
stuff.
was more than bagels and lox
All right.
and going to high holidays.
So you were in shock.
I was not in shock, I was just very interested.
Excited, okay.
I was excited and interested.
Great.
And as I took my spirituality very seriously, and this was a challenge now for me. I thought I pretty much knew what it was about, but here this new information came in, which went into such more depth and had such more meat to it. That it was something I had to learn more
You mean
about.
there's more meat than what you thought Judaism had before, or more meat than even what you had been involved in with the Hindu guru?
Absolutely both.
Okay. Explain the second. What do you mean that it had more meat than what you had been exposed to?
Well, the specific details. I mean, when you start learning Kabbalah and specifically Hasidus, which is a very practical explanation of Kabbalistic principles, so to speak, no leaf is left unturned. Every question.
Could you just explain Kabbalah for those of our viewership who are not familiar with Kabbalah?
Sure. Kabbalah literally means, the translation is to receive. And it is the oral tradition, and most particularly the mystical aspect of the oral tradition that was received by Moses at Mount Sinai and was passed on verbally throughout the generations to those that were deemed worthy or interested in this deeper level of understanding.
All right, great. Go on.
Hasidus is the most recent revelation and in many ways the deepest revelation of Kabbalah. Whereas most other Kabbalistic schools, it's almost like learning spiritual physics. There's it's very difficult to make it practical and meaningful in your life unless you really
this
go
brings
into
it down and makes it something that you can bring into your life.
Takes it down and starts dealing with it in almost like a psychological way, so you can really directly apply to your life.
Okay, so when you started to see those things from what this woman was teaching you, you started to see a level of mysticism or spirituality that you've never been exposed to.
Yes. And most particularly, and the phrase that I think sums it up, that we can go into in more depth, is that Hasidus, or Judaism, brings spirituality down to a higher level.
Down to a higher level. Okay.
Brings it down to a higher level.
Guess what? I'm going to ask you to explain that.
Okay. Okay. In most Eastern paths,
Yes.
The goal is to transcend the physical, and actually in some Eastern paths, the physical is seen as an illusion, as Maya, and to enter into a more ethereal experience leading towards samadhi, or bliss.
Okay. In other words, as we know, to transcend the physical to become more spiritual.
Transcend the physical to
Okay,
become
like
more
transcendental
spiritual.
meditation and these types of things.
Exactly. That
Okay.
would be transcendental.
Exactly.
A
Okay.
transcendental experience.
Great.
Whereas Judaism is saying is that there's a polarity, that the highest level of godliness, the will, the essence of God, is most specifically connected to the lowest physical level. And that as we get involved in physicality, and there's a big challenge to being involved in physicality, but as we get involved with physicality with a godly purpose, the physicality actually can be utilized as a way of connecting to the highest level of God, to God's will.
All right.
So Gashmias, which is the Hebrew term for physicality, has within it the most profound and the clearest expression of God's will in creating the whole world.
So this is a total change of perspective from anything that Indian mysticism would teach.
Yes, it's not about transcending. It's about becoming a co-creator with Hashem and taking the physical world and releasing the klippa, the shell, that hides the holiness in the physical.
Which is doing a pretty good job of hiding it.
It's doing a wonderful job of hiding
But it's doing it according to God's will.
Yes,
God is the one who created the world in a way that it should be hidden.
yes. That aspect or that power that hides the oneness or the connectedness of the world, of the physicality, is also part of God.
Okay. So you began to delve into these things, and what did it do to you? Did it motivate you to jump into Judaism all of a sudden? Did it motivate you to renounce all of your Hindu teachings? What happened to you? And how did your wife react to all this?
There was a trick that happened, actually. First thing I started doing is I started studying with a very wonderful rabbi in Crown Heights. And while I was studying with him one-to-one, I didn't realize what a privilege it was to study with this man. And I would ask him question after question about this, but what about this? And he would have an answer for every question I would ask. And it became more and more fascinating for me. And then it came to a point where...
Who was the rabbi you studied with?
Rabbi Nissan Mangel.
Oh, really?
Right.
Very well-known rabbi. Yes, go on.
And then it came to a point where it was like time to start putting it into practice. And a woman came into my life at that point, a psychologist from Australia, a Tara HaSofer. And we were involved in putting together a Parv kosher form of meditation in request to the Rebbe's request that Jews have available to them a meditation process that was not steeped in avodah zorah, or idol worship, as many of the Eastern paths I learned were.
Right, so a Torah-friendly path in meditation.
Torah-friendly path of meditation. But the trick was that when I asked the Tara, well, I think it's time for me to start practicing some aspect of Judaism. What do you recommend? And she said, well, nothing big. Why don't you just, I don't know, just start wearing a yarmulke? And I asked, well, what's the, the spiritual purpose of wearing a yarmulke? She says, it's a constant reminder that Hashem is always present,
right,
and that you are, under Him. And I said, that's far out. I'll take that on. Now, little did I really think it through, that once you start wearing a yarmulke, and you come across both Gentiles and non-Jews, they all expect you, at that point, to be completely observant.
Yes.
So now I had all this pressure on me to be observant, and gradually, actually it wasn't gradually, rather rapidly, I started acting like an observant Jew on the outside.
Because you felt, how could I not?
Now, I'd already made a commitment to wearing the yarmulke. Now, how could I go into a non-kosher food store and eat there with a yarmulke on my head?
She was a wise woman.
It was a very tricky suggestion for me.
All right.
So that really accelerated my practice of Judaism, and it started to catch up with my learning of Judaism.
Okay. Now, for people out there, which there are many, who are interested in spirituality, interested in healing, interested in getting more in touch with their soul, whether it be a Jewish soul, or in case of non-Jew, a non-Jewish soul, whatever that might be, how do you suggest them trying to feel more at home with that, to connect? What advice would you give, not only from your own personal life, but also, let's say, from those things that you've learned from Chassidut and from Kabbalah, how to begin that process of discovering their own spirituality?
That's an interesting question.
And one idea would be just to send them to the local Chabad rabbi. They should start learning the same types of things you were learning. I'm sure they'll get intellectually stimulated and spiritually stimulated, and they'll want to do more.
Absolutely. But I would say even before that, I think you have to spend some time cutting out the non-essentials from your life.
Okay.
And the thing that comes up when I say that is spend time away from the media profusion that we're constantly bombarded with. Mm-hmm. Shut the television off. Don't become a news junkie. Just create some quiet time so you can sit and think and ask yourself, who am I? The basic, deep questions. Who am I? What am I looking for in life? What's important to me? And once you start saying, it's important for me to feel more connected to godliness, to have more meaningfulness in my life, and you really get that, then start seeking out people and use your intellect. Check these people out of who can be your teachers, mm-hmm. whether they be people who've written books and you read their books, or going to Chabad centers. And each person will have an attraction to someone different, because everyone, what's right. One person's meat and potatoes is not necessarily the other person's.
Right. But let's say a person comes and they want to get more involved in Judaism, they want to be more connected. Now, how would you explain to a person that, let's say, for a woman to light Shabbos candles, which is a physical act, or a man to put on tefillin, which is a physical act, that these things are going to make them more connected to their soul or to their own individual spirituality? Mm-hmm. Because this is really what your point was, that the physical itself becomes the medium through which we can connect to the essence.
Yes.
What does that mean? That's a very foreign thought for a lot of people to be able to grasp.
I think I'm going to feed back to you something that I learned from you. And that's the analogy that a mitzvah is like a bird. And the mitzvah is a holy deed. One of the holy deeds mm-hmm. that's right. That we're commanded by Hashem, by God, to do from the Torah is lighting Shabbos candles. Now, the action itself, doing the deed, doing the good deed, is like the body of the bird. But in order for the bird to fly, it has to have wings.
Right.
And the wings are the kavana, the infusion of the spirit of the physical act with spiritual purpose, and an understanding of that spiritual purpose. And this also is connected to the difference between Jewish meditation and Eastern meditation. Jewish meditation is a very active thought process that eventually leads to meditation in action. that we are to be
Meditation in action.
that we are to be doing holy physical actions, and sometimes they're very practical physical actions, with a understanding, a deep understanding of what that really is, of how Hashem's will is expressed in that physical action.
So of connecting to the essence of the action itself, instead of just going through the action, seeing the action for how it represents true reality as connected to God.
Yes, and it takes preparation. I mean, it takes learning. What is the purpose of this action? What does this mean from Hashem's viewpoint? How does this action help bring the world into a sense of correction or unity? And once you learn, and it's really an active learning process, then you start taking that learning and putting it into action. You start developing a joy that here I am having the opportunity to do God's will. You're like, what's it like to really feel that I have this opportunity to do God's will? And that brings about an action permeated with joy. And that's really what the definition of a chassid is someone who lives his life from that joyous place of knowing that he has the opportunity of doing God's will. And what else is there? I mean, what's higher than that?
That's an interesting point that you're bringing up. I like what you said concerning being able to first step back a little bit also, that would be a first step towards getting connected, of being able to separate ourselves, let's say, from the media. What I like to tell people also is to just get in touch with reality as reality is. I think your point about getting away from the media is a good way of also getting in touch with reality, because let's face it, a person can walk around being so depressed about their whole life. Why? Because of what they heard on the radio this morning. Their own life is wonderful. They have 2 great kids or 3 great kids. They're healthy. They have a great job. Everything around them is fine. But the media tells them that there's big problems in the world. But in another way also, just in peeling off, as you said, the clipper, peeling off this hidden state of being which hides the fact that God is working through the events of their life, through the wonderful, simple deeds of their life, and as a result come to appreciate that. And when they come to appreciate that, they're really connecting to the essence. They're connecting to the soul power which is energizing each of the things of their life. So when they come to a point of lighting a Shabbos candle, or putting on a tefillin, or doing another good deed, or fulfilling something from the Torah, or learning Torah itself, it becomes energized. And I think, so I'm just saying this on the basis of what you're pointing out, and I can hear exactly what you're talking about. I hope that our viewers also can understand it, because it's hard for people to understand how physicality can be a medium towards reaching the spiritual. I get this question very often when I was on campus in Stony Brook years ago. I can understand why Judaism should be spiritual. Religion should be theological. It should be philosophical. It should be feelings of the heart. What does God care if I turn the lights on in Shabbos or turn them off? If I eat kosher or I don't eat kosher? What is this Jewish perspective of God of being preoccupied by the physical? But as you say, that is where you find the essence of God. That is where you find the true will of God. And that's where you're able to connect on a level where spirituality can never really take us. Because the highest spiritual plane that we can reach, even through the highest meditation that any religion perhaps could offer, is only a little bit of an elevation above our present state. While doing a physical act, which, like you say, makes you a co-creator, makes you a partner with God, makes you actually one with the essence. You can't get any better than that.
Many people have heard this analogy, but I think it works real well, so I'd like to spend some time with it, or this explanation. If you ask a physicist, what is physicality? Okay, actually, before we even go into the answer to that, we look at this table or this chair.
Right.
It's made up of molecules.
Okay.
And the molecules are made up of atoms. And the atoms, as we look further into it, are made up of subatomic particles, quarks and strange quarks. And we go into that, we actually, with the most powerful microscope available, we can't find anything solid. So then you ask a physicist, what is the current cutting-edge definition of matter?
Right.
Say it's a probability pattern. That it's probable the next moment it's going to be the same as it was the previous moment.
Right.
But we can't be sure. So there's nothing we can find that's solid here.
Right.
So let's now switch to what Kabbalah would say what physicality is. Physicality is God's will in its most dense, manifested form.
That's great. I like that definition.
That this table is God's thought. This is God's thought.
So physical is only another level of spiritual.
There's no separation. It's not only another level, it's the most dense, concentrated, highest level.
That's
This is where it's most, God's will is most present. That's why it's most dense. And the density also hides it, hides the connectedness. So as we interact with the physical world, if there's not a separation, it is the spiritual world. And we have available in the physical world, as you just said, the opportunity to connect with the highest level that we can possibly even imagine, and that's God's will.
Well, I think that's I think that should provide us with some food for thought for at least the next 30 years. And the fact that for many of the masters, just what you're saying is their pursuit of knowledge over the course of their many, many years is to try to come to an understanding of what exactly that means. Because, of course, in those words, I think you capsulize exactly what the essence of the wisdom is to be able to understand how the oneness of God is working with everything. But we could go on for 30 years talking about it, I'm sure, but we have to wrap up. So I want to thank you very much, Chaim, for being with us. It's been a pleasure. And hopefully we'll have you on another time to continue this conversation, because I know it could go a long ways.
This went so fast to me.
We'll have to do it again. All right. In the meantime, if anything that was said, anything, would stimulate a little bit of curiosity, maybe a little bit of introspection, a little bit of thought-provoking ideas or food for thought, please do yourself a favor. Call us up at Chabad House. We have plenty of programs and meditation sessions, things about Jewish mysticism. We're at 58 Comac Road. That's our headquarters. The number there is 462-7383. We'll be happy to give you any directives or directions about other activities going on all over Long Island with Chabad houses, Kabbalah programs, meditation programs about Jewish spirituality and healing. In fact, Chaim Moscow is running a program in Dix Hills. We have a program in our Port Washington Center as well. We have classes in wisdom of the Hasidic masters also in Comac. We also have, of course, our website, which I hope you'll be able to look up. It's at chabadli.org. And you can also call up our superphone, which is at 76 Super, just to get a computer-driven menu about different things, including a nice bedtime story for the kids, which would be a great thing for parents to try to find out about, just to expose your kids to a little more. So in the meantime, we want to wish you a really great, great, great day. And don't forget, you have a neshama. You have a soul. It's a treasure within you. It's hidden by design. And all you need to do is learn how to tap on it, how to listen to its whisper, how to begin to open up to what it has to say in order to be able to really expand your horizon, find out more about what it means to be a Jew and a fulfilled human being in every sense of the word. So please pick up the phone and call us. Meantime, shalom, take care. We'll see you next week, same place, same station, same time at the Jewish Spotlight.